Okay, so welcome at the meetup. While we're working on the screen in order to start the presentation, I'll do the slides by heart. So basically, if you haven't been to CocoaHeads, this is a meetup, a monthly meetup, normally, where we deal with everything Apple related. So iOS, tvOS, iPadOS, and macOS. And normally, we're every month at a different host. And after Corona, we started up again. So most of the meetups have been online. And that's why we're also, at this moment, broadcasting the current event. So hopefully the slides will be back up. So I want to welcome you. And we've got a few household announcements, let's say. First of all, there is another meetup in October, which will be at Felix, also in Amsterdam, which will be on the meetup page soon. So for registration. And we'll have two presentations tonight, one from Maarten about live activities and one from Eugen about freelancing. So they will join us on the stage quick. And although the slides are not there, we are also organizing another conference this year on the 8th and 9th of November in Amsterdam, the Do iOS. We're in talks if we want to do some kind of workshop in front, but it's going to be 2 days, and the calendar actually is already packed with speakers, and ticket sales have started, so in case you missed it, please check out the website, and otherwise follow us on Twitter to get the latest and greatest. Jeroen will be announcing a lot of details later on. Having said that, there's also a shop with apparel. Taking a look if there's somebody wearing. I saw someone, yes. So if you fancy a t-shirt or a sweater, they're available also on the CocoaHeads website. And our app is on the App Store in case you want to stay up to date about meetups. Without further ado, and looking at the screen, I think let's do a quick check if everything's up and running. Okay, so take your time. So basically, we're hosted today by Catawiki. Already thanks for that. I think not known to many people, but this used to be a warehouse. So I actually like what happened to the place. And we'll see what happens with the slide. Did I forget anything, Ma? Oh yeah, if you want to give a talk at the CocoaHeads meetup, you're all welcome to give a shout out to either Yolanda, Marco, me or Jeroen. Speakers are always welcome, and if you want to have training or some guidance, or there's a recording, so please reach out to us, and then please let us know the topic. I see somebody's mentioning there's also a Slack channel. Yes, you're correct. Thank you, Milan. So if you didn't join us on Slack yet, please let us know as well. Normally the link is on the meetup slides, but in this case, you'll have to do with us. Yeah. So, Axel, got any good jokes? No. And Spain, yes. And Spain. Let's give them a few minutes. So if you didn't get anything to drink, maybe this is the time. Yeah, exactly. Take a drink. We'll be back soon. Hello, hello.
Hallo, hallo. Hallo, hallo. Hallo, hallo. Hallo. Test, 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 test. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Ooh, well, we're going. Okay, maybe not too close. Let me know if I'm too loud or too low. Um, Thanks all for joining. With some technical difficulties, we'll still be able to start. And I got a few minutes to tell you just a little bit about Catawiki. Then I'll give the mic to Maarten, and he can tell you a little bit more on more fun stuff for you guys, I guess. So what? Maybe just a question: everybody knows what Catawiki does? Just real quick. Anybody who doesn't know what Catawiki does? Yeah, then it's worthwhile. To tell you a little bit about Catawiki, we are an online marketplace for special objects. So what we try to do is bring sellers and buyers together for these special objects, and how we're different than, let's say, eBay, is that we're a curated marketplace. So we work with experts who work for Catawiki, and they look at all the objects that come on our platform, they curate it, they look at is it of a certain value, is it the authentic thing they're trying to sell, and is it a special object in the sense that is it widely available if it's scarce. We really like the scarce objects, right? So we like special wines, whiskeys, special art. That's the kind of stuff you'll see on our platform. And this market is predominantly offline still. So you mostly see the objects we're trying to sell in flea markets, galleries, shops, fairs, and auction houses. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get this market online. So our CEO likes to say where booking brought travel online, where takeaway brought food delivery online, we want to be the place that brings special objects online. So that's really our purpose. So yeah, what we promise our buyers that they can find these special objects, that they can bid on these special objects, and hopefully acquire them. And for sellers, we offer a curated marketplace where they can have safe pay, safe shipping, and everything will be kind of sorted for them. And yeah, of course, we're in an iOS meetup. Where does tech come in? So this is a little bit overview of our tech organization. It's now the second largest part of our organization. And here you see the different disciplines. So we have engineering, product management, UX, quality assurance, data science, and information security. And on the right, you can kind of see the numbers. So roughly now 80 in engineering, and you can see it down. And if anybody's curious, I think we have roughly now 10 to 12 iOS engineers. So yeah, what does the tech department do? They make sure that this platform actually works, whether it be on web, iOS, or Android, and that empowers our buyers and sellers, of course. And yeah, a little bit of the stats. So we currently have more than 750 people working for us, more than 50 nationalities. We operate in 10 countries. And there you see we have people apparently from 20 to 74 years old, and the average tenure is 2.8 years. What's really cool about working at Catawiki as an engineer, we feel, is that it's still a relatively small organization, that your code will actually see the light of day, you'll actually make impact, and people will use it, whether it be on iOS, Android, or web. And we feel like it's really a place where passionate people thrive. So this mainly comes from the experts. These will be the most passionate people you ever meet, whether it be about a coin or a special whiskey, and we feel that throughout the whole organization. Thank you.
All right. Yes, I think I'm loud and clear. Yes, live activities now and in the near future. Rough guide to an Apple beta feature. I'm not sure who of you know about live activities. My plan today is to explain what they are, how we are intent to start using them within Catawiki, and yeah, go into the technical details, of course. So to start off, a short story about how I came to learn about the live activities and how I got to this place today. It was 6th of June 2022. I think most of you will probably have been watching the platform State of the Union during WWDC, and then they started mentioning stuff about live updates, and I thought, this might be interesting for our app. What is this about? Then they started showing these nice graphs. On your lock screen, you can see the live status of activities or stuff that you are doing. And we really thought, I really thought, this is something that we could use at Catawiki. We are having auctions, they have an end time, and the prices keep increasing, especially people that have already placed bids. They would be very interested in keeping close eye on what is going on there. But then I was checking the rest of WWDC, no videos, no docs. They did mention in some note this will be part of a later update in iOS 16 later this year. But there was simply nothing. Well, docs, not so surprised that there's no docs with Apple, but still no videos. That was a bit of a surprise for me. Then luckily in end of July, there was in the developer beta 4 of iOS 16, they announced live activities are now available in the beta. Still they mentioned it will be for a later version of iOS 16, but then I thought, yes, now I can finally dive into it. So I started playing around with the SDKs. Nice that there was actual documentation about this. Still no videos. There are still today, I think, no videos on how to use this, which is, well, still a bit interesting for Apple, I think. But yeah, there is documentation, so I started diving into the documentation and to the app and playing around with it. Then iOS 16 got released, but there was no more live activities because it was not available in the first version of iOS 16. And also, I was wondering, so should I keep using the old version of the old beta version now, and how long does it stay active, and can I actually keep using it, or when does the actual release of live activities come? Then 2 days later, the 16.1 beta got live, and they announced again that live activities will be part of this. They also announced it will be part of the 16.1 release. Still not sure, of course, when this will actually go live, but there is again a beta that I could play around with. So I started picking my old project that I was playing around with, putting it in the 16.1 beta, and it crashed. Or basically didn't compile. And I was thinking, so they completely changed the whole API. The interesting part was that I noticed that the things were failing on missing parameters for Dynamic Island, which was, of course, just announced for the iPhone 14 Pro. So that was kind of interesting, because then I thought, oh, this is actually a feature that also will start utilizing the Dynamic Island. So how does it work together? Let's dive into it a little bit more. I was glad that the docs were at that point also updated. So there was actually also the documentation of how to work with this Dynamic Island. Yeah, so that's the story. So this was what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago? Now I had 2 weeks to prepare the rest to make sure that to have a presentation today. So to start off with the basics, what are live activities in iOS? So basically they are lock screen widgets and dynamic island widgets that contain live data. So what they already showcase is deliveries that you can get live updates on to know when it will arrive, your workout activity or match for a sports match that you want to follow, and make sure that to have the up-to-date information about who scored and what is going on there. I saw an example of a flight tracker. So in very short, it looks like a widget. It's actually built like a widget. So if you are already familiar with WidgetKit, it will be very similar to build this thing. It behaves as a widget and kind of like a notification, because it's on your lock screen in between your notifications. Also, the way to update them is partly similar to notifications. It's scheduled from within the app by the user, which is different than a widget and also different than a push notification, because those are just, well, not from within the app or not scheduled by the user, but pushed from our backend. But this one, you have to explicitly have the app in the foreground and then trigger a live activity. The user can have multiple live activities. They can have multiple live activities per app even at the same time. But there is a limit, and Apple, being Apple, says we don't tell you the limit, but there might be a limit, so you might get a rejection whenever you try to create one. But they say it's a fair amount. It's a live activity can be active up to 8 hours, then it gets automatically ended by the system. And after it gets ended, it can stay up to in your lock screen for up to 4 hours. You can, as a developer, choose to remove it earlier, or the user can also remove it earlier. It will be introduced later this year, iOS 16.1. I guess that it will still be this year, but who knows how many 16.0 point some things we will get before. It will not be on iPadOS. It's an iPhone only feature. And it has special features on the dynamic island devices. 14 Pro comes to mind, and future devices probably as well. So why should we build this live activity? So I've been thinking about this, and we've also had discussions with some designers here at Catawiki about what is the use case, and the most obvious use case is following the end of an auction, because if a user placed a bid, they want to keep close tabs on what happens. If they get outbid, they might want to overbid. We want to also stimulate that, of course. Our auctions have a semi-fixed end time, so they have an end time, but it can get extended if someone places a bid just before the ending time. Then other people get the opportunity to overbid them. So it gets extended by 90 seconds or something. The price is variable, of course, because it goes up. Users want to be informed about this as soon as possible. This is something that we know that there are users. A lot of users are actually in the last minutes just watching our object screen to see when they have to tap and try to last minute place a bid and stuff like that. And there might also be other potential use cases, for example, in our shipping process, or perhaps for selling objects. There is a whole procedure that the sellers go through to get their objects approved. So perhaps there is also some opportunity there for live activities, but we wanted to focus first on this, this auction scenario. So how to set up a live activity widget. So the widget part, if you're already familiar with WidgetKit, as I mentioned, this should be pretty straightforward. You cannot actually reuse the same widget that you already have for your, as a regular widget. You cannot reuse it directly as a live activity because it's a different configuration. But you can, of course, reuse the views in whatever way you want. There is not really a limitation there. So what you basically have to do, you create a widget bundle and then you add a new, or you already have a widget bundle, you create a new live activity widget, or if you don't have a bundle, you just create a live activity widget. And one thing that is important is the dynamic island layout has to be provided. Actually, it won't compile if you don't supply this. That's what happened actually when I was trying, which is kind of interesting. And also I think Apple wants to promote that you actually give this consistent experience for the users. So to set up, first, of course, you need to install the latest betas. Having an iPhone 14 Pro is nice to have, but I noticed you can test most of the stuff in simulator. Well, iPhone 14 Pro is anyway nice to have, I would say. But so creating the widget extension, it's the same like thing. You create an extension. You say I want a widget extension. You give it a name. Then you add to your info plist in your app, you add the NS supports live activities, and you have to put it to yes, of course. Then you start by creating your data model, basically. So there is, it's called Activity Attributes Protocol that you have to implement. And that protocol contains your static fields of your activity. Like in this case, a lot, by the way, a lot is basically the objects that we sell. It has a name and an ID, and that is static. That doesn't change throughout the life cycle of the live activity. And then there is a variable content state that you have to provide, which is the dynamic part, the stuff that updates live. So our closing time can change, the current value can change, the bidding status can change. Like, is this person on top, or is the person outbid? And then for the updates, there is a max of 4 KB payload that you can send. This is the same as for push notifications, I believe. And so you cannot really push a lot of like image data or something live. They say you can push image data for the static part, but I will get back to that. Then having the data model, you have to configure the widget, which works with an activity configuration, which is similar to widget configuration. But yeah, it has some specific aspects for it. So first, in the activity configuration, it defines your lock screen view. And then the second part is defining the dynamic island view. And well, it takes, of course, the context, and the context is your attributes and your current state. Then to first dive into the lock screen view, this is basically a regular SwiftUI view, so you can do whatever you're used to do that, or with your other widget. It's quite similar to System Medium widget, but not quite. The height is a little bit different, I noticed. So the previewing is a bit tricky. I tried using the preview contact with System Medium because it's similar, but then sometimes it wasn't even working at all, and sometimes it was working, but then it's slightly higher, and then so I ended up just running stuff in the simulator or on device to actually test the stuff. Apple says the height can be 160 points, and if it's higher, it can be truncated, which is another nice vagueness, but I think they were saying try to keep it to 160 points. And there are some limitations around animation. You cannot do continuous animations on your lock screen widgets because it's not actually running, it's just static. So things like with animation and animation modifiers are ignored, and instead uses some system animation whenever the state changes. So whenever you push an update, then it does some animations, and you can configure those using the content transition modifier. So what it then looks like in practice for the lock screen, so I define it as my activity view. It of course has the state, the static state attributes, and then the state in this case, and then there's just your body with your whole thing. Some interesting parts are here. I added a link. In the expanded view, you can have multiple tab areas for different links. The documentation says that you should use widget URL for the complete thing, but for the lock screen, that doesn't seem to work. It might be just a bug in the beta, I hope, but I have to wait and see, I guess, to future beta versions. But yeah, you can define your deep link there to go directly into your app and deep link. This is about the image. I wanted to have a dynamic image that is set by the attributes, but unfortunately couldn't get that to work. It also seems like a bug, but you never know. So for the rest of this demo, I will show you just a static image. Yeah, there is some. In this case, for some text that is dynamic, I use the date style text field, which then can be a countdown, like a timer style, which is nice that it actually works. So that kind of animation does work apparently. And I also put a custom content transition here for numeric text. So whenever we update the closing time, it will animate nicely to the new value. And also, something that I played around with was trying to use custom fonts, and it works in some fields but not in others. So again, I am assuming that this is a beta issue, but yeah. So that's a way to wait and see how that ends up in production. Then all the way on the bottom of your view, you can define the background colors. By default, it's translucent, like what you see a lot on also in the demos, I think that Apple shared. But you can set it to whatever color you want, and then you can also set your system action foreground color, which is like if you swipe left and the text there, that kind of color. So doing this, it will end up looking like this a little bit, which is kind of nice. But then there's also the dynamic island. So to configure that, it has 4 components that you have to set up. You have to set the minimal component, which is the top one you see where there is, if you have multiple live activities, it will show up like that. Then if there's only one, you have the live activity, then you have the compact leading and trailing, which is the 2 fields besides the dynamic island, or besides the camera part, basically. And then if you long press it, you will get the expanded view, which has, again, 4 regions: left, right, center, and bottom. And you have to define all of these things. This is how well, left, right is leading, trailing, and center and bottom field works in the expanded version. Again, they also say 160 points. So that's basically the same. And this is basically the second parameter of your, or the third parameter actually, of your activity configuration. So there you define your dynamic island based on your context. And it starts with the expanded view, and then you define all these expanded regions for leading, for trailing, for center, and for bottom, with whatever you want to put in there. Then for the bottom, you can use a button or a link, because that is also a separate tab area that you could use to have 2 different deep links into your app. And then you have to define your compact leading, compact trailing, and minimal views, which again is just whatever you want to put in there. And all the way in the bottom, you can define your overall deep link target, which for the dynamic island worked already in the beta. Then it will start looking something like this. And so then we have configured the whole view, then how to set it up from the app, how to update, and how to end these. Basically, starting the activities, as I mentioned, can only be done from the app when the app is in the foreground. Updating activities you can do while the app is in foreground or in background, or also from backend. If you have push notifications, you can actually push an update directly to the live activity. And you can end activities also the same way as updating, but also the user can just swipe left and remove your activity. So starting the activity, first you have to check some things, because there's devices that don't support it, like iPad, and you could be disabled by the user in the settings for your app. So you have to check, are activities enabled, if you want to do it synchronous, or if you want to keep an eye on this, you can use activity enablement updates and then just get a stream of any updates on this field. Then you will start the activity. Basically, pretty straightforward. You just say try to start the activity with these attributes. You do a request, and then hope that it succeeds. If it fails, it might be good to handle this gracefully, because the user might have reached the maximum amount of live activities currently, and then it doesn't show. So you want to inform the user about that probably. Then updating. When your app is in the foreground, you can take the opportunity to just get the latest status, because you have computation time enough probably. There's no limit when you're in the foreground to how many times you want to update it. So it's probably a good idea to have this in place, this mechanism to update whenever the app is in the foreground. But of course, users are usually, when they're watching the live activity, the app is not in the foreground. So for that case, it doesn't really help. So the second approach for updating is using background tasks. So in that way, you could do regularly scheduled updates from your app and run it in the background. Of course, this is not a guarantee that you have like the specific times to update. It's always also not too frequent. If you request them all the time, then the system will say, no, you don't get this much time. And of course, this is more of a pull-based mechanism in most cases, because the app will have to pull from our backend and then push the update to the live activity. And that makes it a bit less accurate, I think, than updating using remote push notifications. So when using these remote notifications, this is, well, similar than using regular push notifications, which I think probably a lot of people are already familiar with, but it's also a bit different. Because they're a specific type of notification that are just for the live activity. You cannot really reuse the same notification like you can do with background updates sometimes, and then you can also send a notification. In this case, they have to be two separate ones. Well, of course, it's push-based, and you can have it controlled by backend, which might give you more control, depending on your case, I guess. Of course, you have to take care that the user can disable push notifications, and then it's not arriving. They are also not guaranteed to arrive if the network is down, but well, you probably have the same issue with background tasks not being able to fetch new data. And when you send too many notifications, the system might, or the APNS server might start throttling you, so not all the notifications might get through anymore. But what is too many of, again, is one of these Apple vaguenesses. You never know. I guess that given these examples that they give with following a sports match, like that kind of frequency should be fine. Depending on some kinds of sports, I think it gets more or less frequent updates. But yeah, so what it looks like in code, if you do it in foreground, you can either keep track of your created activities just by keeping a reference, or you fetch a list of your currently live activities. You can do that by just getting the static variable or property on activities. You can also do this in an asynchronous way to get a stream of updates on this. And then you can actually go over your live activities and start updating them, which is basically just an await call, an asynchronous call to say update with a new state, and then you can, if you want, configure an alert to go with it, so it can make a sound, and also on your watch it will show a message, or you can just leave it out and make it more silent update. Depending on your use case, it might be a good idea or not. And Yeah, so that's also what I said here. So this is also an interesting, at least what I found for debugging, this is also an interesting approach, because what I then ended up doing a lot was just putting a dispatch main async after to just automatically start pushing updates so that I could see if the changes actually come through. So for testing the widget themselves, it was a nice approach that it worked. I don't think that it works as well if you ship it like this, but then using background tasks, if you're already familiar with the background tasks API, this is also pretty straightforward, I guess. You have to set up your identifier for your scheduled task, and then you have to register it at app launch and then handle whatever task gets in. So whenever a task gets in, you can do, well, what I did is basically set up a sequence of operations, first getting all the live activities currently, then fetching the latest state for these activities, and then sending the live activity updates to the live activities. I'm not going into the full implementation details here, but this is the part where we actually push the updates. So basically we loop over the live activities, match them with our latest data, check if the old state and the new state is different, because if it's not different, there's not really a use to update them anyway. And then asynchronously update, just like in the foreground case. Then if you want to use push notifications, you need to set up this custom activity specific push token. So it's not the same push token that you use for regular push notifications. This is one specifically for this instance of the live activity. So the next live activity will have a different token. It might also change while this live activity is running, so you have to make sure to keep updating your server. And it needs some specific payload. It needs to have an event field, which is either update or end, if it needs to be updated or ended. And it needs a content state field, which is basically the JSON that you also have defined in your content state. And this is actually just decoded into your instance of this updated state. So you have to make sure it compiles with decodable. Then on the server side, what you have to take care of is that you need to set a value APNS push type in the request header to live activity, and the APNS topic in the header needs to be your bundle ID .push type .live activity to get it working. And once the live activity ends, you have to make sure to invalidate the token, because it won't be useful anymore for the future. So this is what it then looks like in code. So when starting an activity, we request authorization for push notifications. Probably you should also handle the error case properly here. And then we actually try to set up to request the activity. There is a parameter push type, which is usually nil if you don't want to support push, and otherwise you set a .token. And if you do that, you will also there is an optional field activity.push token that you can check for what is actually the push token that you want to send to the server. And it also makes sense to start updating or listening for push token updates on your activity, so then you can fetch the latest push token and then push this one to your server, along with whatever other things the server needs to know to be able to send the updates, of course. So when testing this, the documentation says it should work on simulator if you have Apple Silicon, Mac, or a T2 security chip. I couldn't get this working yet, so well, this is, I think, potential bug number 5 or something. But I wanted to test this locally because we didn't have our push server set up for this yet. So what I did was I used the open source push notification app by On My Way 33, a Koa developer, which is a nice app in Node.js, which was interesting. Well, you can run it out of the box, but it doesn't support the live activity notification, so I did some tweaks, and I'm still planning to send them a PR to also start supporting this in their release. Basically, this app looks like this. So you set up your P8 file for your push token, for your server token, and then you send your bundle ID.pushToken.liveActivity, you enter your activity specific push token, your payload, and then you send it, and then, well, if you have done it well, then it succeeds. So that was about updating. About ending the live activities, this is pretty much the same as updating. You can do it locally by just saying activity.end instead of activity.update. You can still push the latest state for the ending, so it will be updated to a final state, and then no edits are allowed anymore. You can set a dismissal policy, so if you want it to stay 4 hours or less, then you can define that. Yeah, in a push notification you can use event end instead of event update, and then it will do the same. And the user can also do it manually by just swiping left and then say clear, and then also the activity is gone. So the results, I think I will try to press it here. This is what it looked like in my demo app that I created. This is for the lock screen, so this is basically a small kind of a demo version of our main app. You can create the live activity, then you see it on your lock screen. You can see that it updates after a couple of seconds because I hard-coded that in this case. You can have multiple ones, you can then expand it and see multiple ones going on and being updated together. And then I think after a couple of seconds it will mention that one of the things is 1, and that will happen now. And then you can actually tap it and then, well, go deep link to whatever you want. You can also deep link, of course, earlier, but for the demo I did it like this. Yes. Then for Dynamic Island, it looks like this, pretty much the same thing. So you start an activity, then you check on the Dynamic Island, you can see that it is in the small. You can long press, then you can see the expanded view. Here you can also, if you want at any point, you can tap it to go into the deep link. You can also start multiple ones, and then you will have the 2 timers, and you can still long press. It always tends to make the latest update the bigger one, and the smaller one is the ones with the least recent updates. So that's more or less what we achieved. It seems to work, so that's nice. And so yeah, there is of course some learnings. I think it's a great feature if you have a good use case. It might not be for every app that has this, but I think there is really good value in a lot of cases. If you have, I don't know, deliveries, or if you have something that is really that has an end time, even though you might not know the end, and the end time is like the 8-hour time scheme might be. If that's good for you, then it's a great feature, I think. It does lock screen and Dynamic Island. By Dynamic Island, I was a bit surprised because I wasn't really expecting to have, as a developer, like the opportunity to work with this at such short notice after releasing this feature. You can update in foreground, background task, or remote push notifications, which is also depending on your use case. You can mix and match, I think, with what makes sense. Testing can be pretty tricky, especially because on simulator you cannot do background tasks, of course. Push notifications should be working, but are not really working all the time, so that's interesting. And also when using background tasks, if you want to force an update, you also have to do it from the console, which is again possible, but also a bit finicky, I thought. And it's beta software and can be unpredictable. There was like the 5 or 6 bugs or potential bugs that I noted already. So learnings, what was really nice way for me when I started thinking about this, as a developer, I usually think after WWDC, this is a nice feature, we want this. But then starting to think about why should we want this actually? What is the use case behind it? Also, I noticed a lot that it gets easier in companies to actually get buy-in for a feature if you have a full story of what problem are we solving with this thing that is actually good for the users. Well, of course you learn about ActivityKit, and for me it was also a good way to get even more exposed with things like SwiftUI, async await, user notifications, operation, class, and WidgetKit. So that's also it's interesting that it combines a lot of these kind of libraries and APIs that Apple has built in the last years. There is some open ends on the technical side. Well, we want to have these live images from a URL into the live activity, and we hope that it's a bug, but we hope that we can fix it. Debugging push notifications is a bit of an issue sometimes, because sometimes it succeeds to send a push notification, but you don't see anything happening. You think, what is going on? I just learned about the APNS debug profile that you can install on your phone, so I still have to figure it out and see if that actually helps. And yeah, just a minor thing, but we have to integrate it into our production app and into our backend, and then launch it. Hopefully soon. Also on UX side, there is some open ends, because we need to fine-tune the flow for users, because when is it appropriate time to start this activity? You have to be within those 8 hours, of course. So how do we trigger this? Perhaps we want to send a push notification for the users that might be interested, that we know might be interested in, hey, if you start a live activity now, you can actually get live updates all the time. That's something to decide about. Also, when do we push an update, because we want to do it as accurate as possible, but we shouldn't overdo it because we don't want to get throttled. So that's also a bit of a trade-off, especially when it gets closer to the auction close time. Then there is a bit of trade-off, regular push notification versus live activity, especially when they might happen at the same time, because that might be a bit of overkill for the users. They might be a bit annoyed to get both on their screen. And then finding the optimal UX of the activity, especially these minimal views. You have some small area of stuff to put in, and then you really need good designers, I think, to think about like how can we convey our message in this very tiny, like, I don't know, 40 by 40 pixels or 60 by 60 pixels, whatever it is. And that's also a big challenge, I think. That's it. Any questions?
Hello? How do you keep up to date with live tracking when the app is open? Is that using WebSockets or so, or?
Yeah, you mean in our app we usually do it using WebSockets, yes.
Okay, so you then use it the same. So when you have the app open, you don't just push it, or because you said you have a problem with live activities, which I assume are through WebSockets, and then push notifications as well?
No, the live. Let me go back. So the live activities, I mean, like the things that you have on your lock screen, you can schedule a live activity and then go through that mechanism to update. But if we currently have, for example, if you go close to the auction close time, we also push a push notification. And people that already have the live activity might not be interested in the push notification, or might find it annoying even. So that's, yeah, that's what I meant with that.
Other questions?
Thanks, Maarten. A small question. So when you like experiment with the beta frameworks, and when you discover some bugs, like, are there places to report them?
Yeah, I still have a list of bugs that I have to report, but I think you just use the feedback assistant for it.
Okay, good.
Any else?
How does the user add this to their lock screen? Like you said, can they do it from within your app, or do they have to modify the lock screen manually?
It actually, let me go back to the video. So it was a bit, I didn't really explain it, but currently I just put a button here to say for this item, start an activity. And that basically creates the live activity. And the first time when you do that, when the app is first installed, it will also say, give a message on the live activity saying, do you want these kind of live activities, yes or no? So if the user says no, then they are disabled for this app. If they say yes, then the next time they will just show up.
So you don't have to explicitly ask them like you do for.
No, there's no
location
such a
or-
thing like with
No.
push notifications. Do you want to receive them?
Okay.
Not a system dialogue. But
Cool. That was
yeah.
my question. Yeah.
I was kind of surprised by that as well. So I'm not sure. Perhaps for the release they build it in, but I hope not. Well, as a user, I might hope yes, but I don't know.
Hey, I'm Mark. Thanks for your presentation. Yeah, we have a question. Well, I have a question about the timing, basically. So we're also thinking about using a live activity, but what is a good timing for you guys, especially towards the end, indeed, of maybe
You
the
mean the timing
auction?
for the updates or for
Yeah,
scheduling?
for the updates, specifically when
Ooh.
using push.
Yeah, still thinking about this. Like it's a bit of we have to look at our data. I think with about like how often our do we get bids in the last hours or minutes. Perhaps we want to diversify. Like if it's still a couple of hours away, we might do just once every 10 minutes or something like that, and then closer to the end time, perhaps a bit more often. But we also have to play around with this and see what is possible, I think, and see when we start hitting the barriers of iOS.
Yeah. Thanks.
I would like to add something about the permissions. Like there's a special type of push notification. I think it's called provisional notifications.
Yeah,
They also don't require initial permission, and they get a
Yeah.
message like that.
It's
like you want
basically-
to continue.
yeah, it's
receiving
pretty
these.
similar, I think.
Yeah, so I think in the final release they will have something like that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Martin, I will ask maybe a new question. So what happens with the colors when a device goes to the dark mode?
I think you can set up like what you can do in SwiftUI anyway. You can set up colors that have a dark mode variant, or use the system colors, then it will handle it automatically.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
you could just use it whatever you are used to in SwiftUI, I think.
Then I'd like to thank Maarten for the presentation.
Thank you.
Path to freelance.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, nice. Sounds also. We have a limited time, so I'll try to speak faster, which of course not my advance. Hopefully you will follow me. So if I speak too fast and my pronunciation is not recognizable, give me a sign. And it's super nice to be here. So I'm actually an Android developer. So I joined CocoaHeads 7 years ago. And then time I was doing an Android and iOS. So I still coming to meetups because there are quite many talks about soft skills, about processes, about something really interesting on the edge. My presentation actually is nothing much about technology. There will be some terms, but in general, it's kind of general. Okay, let's start. So I want to also give a message. So I'm Ukrainian. My country now is war, and I want to thank European Union and all kind of allies who help in Ukraine. Without that help, it will be really hard to fight because this requires a lot of weapons, money. Also, thank you for keeping refugees in the Netherlands and in general in Europe. So please continue. Yeah, thank you. And appreciate it. So, and now let's back to the talk. So let's warm a bit. Not warm. You've been talking already. So I want to just test the audience. So please raise your hand if you heard about freelance. Heard about freelance? Yeah. Okay. Then please keep a hand if you thought starting working or in the future or right now to work as freelancer. Okay, so great. And then please keep a hand if you're already working as a freelancer. Okay. Okay, so then also all these people who actually still kept a hand, feel free to interrupt me, give some comments, correct me. And who was in the second group, this talk is actually specifically for you. I was in this situation and I tried to summarize things, my feelings, findings, and hopefully they will be all similar for you. So I'll talk about in 3 sections. First section is about motivation, then talk about all kind of findings, maybe tips and tricks, some interesting things, and then as usual I want to look in the future. So like, is it like, can I do something? What will I do in the future? And there will be. Do I need to move it? Okay. So then there will be a short section about future paths. And this is my motivation. I mean, like, this is also the greatest plus about working as freelancer is compensation. So 2 years ago, I still was internal, and I worked for the company in the bucket number 3. So in the beginning, my salary was in the beginning of the curve number 3. And my ruling was coming to the end, and I was thinking, okay, so if I don't do anything, I will still have same growth, but I will lose in the net. And I was thinking, can I do something? And I knew that my company will not increase it much, and I also knew that I will leave this company soon or sometime in the future. And then staying as internal, the only way to increase will be going to some, I don't know, fun company or maybe Catawiki, whatever. And I knew, I don't know, so maybe people from Catawiki know better, but I felt like I did 6 times already attempt to join FANG companies, and they all failed. So I was thinking, like, in short notice, in short period, I will not actually succeed. At least, yeah. And then on the other hand, there was actually starting freelance. I was on an online conference. People came to me saying, like, hey, we like your attitude. We have open position. Do you actually want to try? And I said, like, why not? So by the way, this slide, this picture is from article. So if you never saw it, I recommend to read it. It actually makes a puzzle about compensation in Netherlands and in Europe in general. There's a link to it, so go to it. And then this was objective part. Subjective part for me was working for remote. So from my experience, when you are internal, it's harder to work on a company which is based in different countries. So there, of course, I know a lot of people work from Netherlands and Belgium, from Belgium and Netherlands. So there are probably solutions to do it. However, my first search was actually, it's limited. And but when you're a freelancer, you have a company, you have entity, you can work with any company in the world. So there are no stoppers to go somewhere or work remotely. So now let's talk about some findings, differences, and so on. So I'll try to make this also as much as objective. So there will be one slide, subjective one, which is really connected to my feelings and findings. I didn't include this section, things like when to start freelance, am I ready to start freelance, or do companies require freelancers to be more efficient, and so on, so on. So these questions are really depends on the company, on you, on type of project, but there are some kind of things which are more objective. And to start with the must, rule of thumb when you work as freelancer, you are not paid when you're not working. So basically, doesn't matter of reason why you're not working, you're not paid. So you have to pay for your vacation. Means like your vacation become more expensive. Any kind of sickness, any kind of trainings, conferences, whatever, they own your cost. So some companies have compensation, but it's not a kind of in mainstream. So second one is if you work with, if your client is in Netherlands, you have to give a bill with BTW, and then quarterly you need to transfer this BTW to a tax office. I didn't research if there are actually possibility not to have a BTW with the Netherlands. No? Okay, so.
Unless you charge schools or companies that have zero BTW.
Oh, okay, clear. Actually, I was lucky because I work with Sweden company and with US company, so I have zero BTW. But if you work with a Netherlands company, then you have to keep in mind that there will be amount of the people, there will be fine if you don't pay on time, so keep an eye on it. So then also, if you work in some areas like finances, health insurances, something sensitive with people data, quite often quite often companies ask you to have a liability insurance as a company. In case you made a mistake or something, there's like a insurance to cover your mistake. I have it, so it's not expensive. And then a kind of bureaucracy, since you actually have company, you need to run it, so you have to buy licenses, buy your own hardware, pay for your trips, some lunches. So it's nice also to expense this, track it, because they will go against your income tax at the end of the year. But still, it's kind of bureaucracy which you might not not enjoy it, or Also, if you skip it for a month, then it's kind of a burden going through all your bank account to see like, okay, what was that? Where's my bill? Where's my check? And that's might be, how to say, not so pleasant. So then we talk about something nice to have. So advice to have a separate bank account. I think it's not required to have, you can work with your personal account. No?
You probably can, but it's terrible.
Yeah, but also when you have a separate account, it's a clear money flow, so no kind of no kind of brainwasher. Is it my company expense or it's my own expense, and so on. Also now bank accounts quite advanced, so they can have automation like saving this BTV for you for a future for a separate account, doing some automated transfers, having some even basic budgeting. So yeah, I have Revolut account which works great for me. It's zero, cost me zero, and then nice to have also disability insurance. Basically, like if you have an injury, you cannot work, you're sick. No, okay, sick is different stuff, but I mean, like you have an injury, you're stuck somewhere, whatever. Then you have at least insurance to run your regular bills, like mortgages and I don't know, school's money and so on. So then you are covered with this. What I said about rule of thumb, same about the pension. So pension, is not like additional pension, which most of us having, is not guaranteed when you work as internal, but when you external, I think it's completely off. So it's on you. You need to find out like how to save the money. Of course, you have an option not to have a separate pension, but it's nice to have. I would recommend also do outsourcing of the account, at least for the first year, because these people in the field for quite a long time, they have a lot of tips and tricks how to save money, how to start things. They will advise you some, they know about some recent laws about discounts you actually eligible. So my accounting, they saved me at least couple of €1,000 in the first year. I only paid 800 euros for their service, and that this money is also going against your income tax. And then I know that some people doing this one, some people don't, but you can actually pay income tax up front. In general, you do not have to do it. So at the end of the year, tax officer will send you how much tax you have to pay. In general, when you're a ZZP, you're not different from usual people from the street. So some things about running a company, but same stuff about income tax, a lot of similarities. And to avoid having this money in account or worrying about at the end of the year where to find this money and so on, you might actually submit upfront to tax office approximate sum which you will receive in the year, and they will give you back at IBAN number where you can regularly transfer the money. So at the end of the year, this amount of the money of difference is not so big, which might be useful.
Actually, be careful with that, because the second year they will ask you to pay upfront based on the first year.
I'm on the second year, so they actually send me a bill, but I still do it regularly, and I send them update because I'm getting more this year, so that's why. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the first year you're off the hook, but the second year they'll ask you to pay what you was charged last year.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay, some detail.
Say you have a great first and second year, and then the third year you don't have any clients. Then suddenly they still want money for you. You have to have a very good reason saying, sorry, I don't have any money. Yeah, prove that. And it's like, suddenly it's your burden to prove that you don't have any clients.
That's why you need the accountant.
Exactly. Who knows that you get a job?
Okay, good tips. Keep going.
Okay. So great tips. Keep listening. So maybe I will invite people also here. So I don't know. So we're already in the section of frustration. So yeah. So when you actually set up a ZZP, this information is public. So there is actually an initiative from government now to actually hide it, but the phone number which you register and address are public. So be careful about this one. I made a mistake I didn't buy just separate SIM card to company phone, and now received in the first months I received enormous amount of spam calls, and I had to call my phone company saying like, hey, can you disable at least the international calls for me? So no one can call me outside from the Netherlands. And I think they have a kind of same system, they share it. So at some point they stopped calling me. So and I returned back receiving international phone numbers. But yeah, so if I would start a company again, I would definitely buy a SIM card. And yeah, so you can also not register your home address, so it will cost you some money. But I received a couple of letters with advertisement, but it was not so terrible. But still, my wife sometimes saying like, hey, people know where do we live. And I say like, I think many people know where we live, but it depends. So then when you start a freelance, you actually build the client at the end of the payment period. So when you start, you will not have money at least a month or maybe more. I think by law you now have to, the company has to pay it within 30 days after due date. Basically, in the worst case, you might have you might not have money for 2 months or around. So keep in mind that you need to have some buffer again to keep your running expenses when you start a company. So then, how to say? My feeling that contracts for freelancers are shorter. So I think 6 months is kind of standard now for contractors, for freelance in Netherlands. And when you internal, you have at least 1 year. And also for freelance, quite often you have a project where you just need to do some stuff and then you're gone. So then be ready about it. You might go to more often situation to find a new job. Which might be stressful. It's stressful for me. Just one notice there, if you work or you decide, you join the project as an external force, like you just external additional developer to the team, then in this kind of projects, from my experience, contracts are more often prolonged. So basically, if you work as internal, but employment is just a freelance, then in this type of projects, you have less, how to say, burden sometimes to actually start finding the new job. And the last frustration is recruiters, so they always kind of buzzing. But since you have a company, they might bill you instead of building a company who are looking for employee. But also, most annoying for me, or at least which I don't like, when they sit in between you and the client. So sometimes it's fine when they just add extra couple of euros per hour for their initial work or for doing some additional stuff like doing your yearly income taxes. But some of them actually hiding how much they charge the client, and for me it's no go. But it depends, of course. Some people might go for this. I like to have transparency, so this is really frustrating for me when they try to hire me and don't say how much they charge for the client. So that was more or less objective stuff. Now I'm coming to subjective stuff. So all the 3 items about imposter syndrome, perfectionism, dealing with time management, reporting stuff. So all the stuff is actually same for when you work internal. I mean, like you will face these phases at some time or some point of your career. What I found that when you're a freelancer, at least for me, I dealing with these things more often. Maybe because I charge more. I mean, like I receive more. How to say? Not I receive. I earn more. Maybe because I work on with more responsibility. Maybe because I bill by hour in hourly rate. In general, like I felt I see these things coming to my plate more often. So who knows? So it's really subjective stuff. You have to deal with this. It doesn't matter you internal and external. So just keep an eye on this. So really interesting was greediness. So me personally, when I saw my first bill to the client, and when just a couple of 3 or 4 hours making a difference how much you will earn, made me at least, oh, I can make work more, I can work more, I can build more. I start seeing the patterns that I tried to avoid sick days. I start to see patterns that I started limiting my vacations sometimes, and it's gone. So, or especially when the company allows you to build overtime. So it happens sometimes. So keep an eye on this one. For me, it was kind of gambling. So I would say. So. It's not healthy, and at some point, I'm glad it's gone. So it was like with computer games in my childhood. So I overcome this one, but yeah, this is something. And the last point, I put networking. So we all network a lot, not a lot, but I mean, like, it's not really necessary when you're internal. So when you're internal, there are kind of pathway in the company, how they develop people. So it's not really, how to say, required to be visible. Keeping connections, but when you're external, when you're freelance, this is the main kind of way how do you find a new job, at least for me. So, or you building your own personal brand. So you go into conference talks, you talking on meetups, writing books, making videos. I don't know, something which brings your visibility from the crowd higher. Or another step, that you work with someone already and they like collaboration with you, and now they work for another client, for another company, and this company now needs an extra force, so they can recommend you, and then you can be hired. So kind of these two passive ways work for freelance the most, at least from my experience. So last section, almost end, not the dead end. Looking for the future, I like to do evaluation, see like how the things gone, and do I have a second door to exit if something not going well. So let's talk about is it dead end? I mean, like, because there's a huge benefit of working as freelancer. So is it dead end? The first point is actually, it's not really like how to say, pass, or you have to watch out, at least I have to watch out about golden cage. And this situation is also valid for when you work internal. You might reach some level where you're comfortable with compensation, you're comfortable with the people around, but you are not happy with some things, and then you kind of in a golden cage, afraid to leave. Yeah, so watching out, because for me, this is a no-go situation. I mean, like, whenever I feel the golden cage, I'm trying to solve it, because golden cage for me is unhappiness, stress, and I spend so much work. I spend so much time at work. So why to spend this time being unhappy? So keep an eye on this one. Really, there's a couple of ways to continue after freelance, or when you became freelancer. So you can still quit. I know a lot of people went from external to internals. They started being chapter leads or just developers. So they agreed with the current companies about some conditions, and they join as internals. Then you can, of course, join some fun company, international company, whatever. So then you have kind of similar compensation, but you have all benefits of being internal. Another way of developing further is starting to become a consultant one, kind of. So when you charge client not by hour, but charge client by project. So you hire for prototype, for, I don't know, some process-wise changes and so on. So then it's more, how to say, scope is bigger and the pay is bigger. Or you open your company, you add more people, and then you use your soft skills, your experience of finding new clients, dealing with project management, and then you take some margin from this. And yeah. So this is kind of future things possible if you feel you need to change. And as a conclusion, so like, let's say my wife wakes up me at 5 in the morning and say like, Eugen, will you recommend working as freelancer? So I would say, of course, like, Darling, are you sure you want to wake up me for this reason? Thank you. But seriously, there's exclamation mark. I found working as a freelancer is great. It's challenging. It's sometimes stressful, but it's good experience. Also, being independent, running on company, and exploring or using whatever you actually learned when you've been internal, and having good compensation. So, if you have any doubts, I recommend to try it. So don't doubt. And by this, that was end. So I don't know. I was quick, even quicker than I was thinking before. So then, if you have any questions, we have time. If you have any comments, feel free. Yeah. Thank you. Actually, yeah. Thank you. Okay, I will repeat the question, so because I think Mark didn't work well. So there was a question for Ricardo. If he starts freelance now, his company right now, what will be 3 things he wished to know before starting the company? Yeah? It's not scary. I know, so definitely to work with accountant. So there are a lot of things you might do, like you will have a discount from the government, from tax office on the first and the second year. You might submit expenses before you start freelancer. So I was able to submit things 2 years upfront, which I bought things 2 years upfront starting freelance. So I submitted my air conditioning at home because it's a home office, so I need it. So it was accepted. I don't know, so I'm not sure if stock office already checked it and they will come for me, but in general, like, it was possible. So then, I don't know, what would be the short thing? Definitely, like, develop your own brand. My 2 current employment, which already happened through my personal brand, kind of. So it's important to be visible and, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Don't you miss seeing your progress over a long time, right? So you're only probably temporarily at companies, and you don't see some of the work you do now develop out. Don't you miss that?
So great question. So question is like, they're kind of they're kind of vibe in freelance that you cannot make long-term. I mean, like, it's not you cannot make long-term impact. You can do long-term impact, but because you might leave company soonish, you will not actually enjoy or develop or see this result. Yeah. So it's true, and this is probably one of the minuses which kind of bothering me right now. So it might also, when you think about starting you might think, oh, should I do this? I'm going to leave soon, and so this is really kind of one of the minuses of working as freelance. But again, so it's not, you can do really impressive things, bleeding edge things, long-term related stuff. And from my experience also, quite many people actually stayed in the company for years. So if you're lucky, you will see your impact as well. Yeah.
What about growth? Like, if you're internal, then most likely you have like a manager that has one-on-one that takes care of your internal growth, that you develop your skills, etc. How does it look when you're freelance?
Nice question. So, so how do you develop what's your growth? So it's not defined. Some companies have. They apply same process for external as well, so they at least have one-to-one talks. And I really appreciate when manager keeps one-to-one, even if I'm external. I'm still a person. I still have kind of doubts, needs, feelings, fears. I don't know, everything. So I'm still alive. and I want to share it with it. So otherwise, I will go to someone else, grab it, and I know. So, but so there is a minus and a plus. The minus is that yes, you have to deal with yourself. So you need to think up front, like, okay, so like when I joined this company, I was thinking like, I want to work remote. So do I enjoy working remote? I want to learn this technology. Do we do this technology? I want to, I don't know. So basically, you're doing your upfront things. At least I do upfront things, and then validate if it works. And do I need to change? And what's my next step? This is of course, harder maybe for some. The big plus of this one, not doing this one, is actually you don't have this politics, bureaucracy. You don't need to, how to say, brag for your bonus. You don't need to deal, I mean, like, additional money, of course, is nice, but same time, you don't need to prove you did something. I mean, like, it's not a case for other companies, but from my experience, quite often, this is a really formal process, and you, at the end, sometimes you receive not what you expected, and it's not objective, but it's more subjective stuff, or because of company deal things and so on. So not having this stuff sometimes is nice. But yeah.
Hi.
Yo.
So when you first started out as a freelancer, like as an internal, you get your salary and then it's done. But then you have to make this calculation, like there are new aspects to take into account, or what's your hourly rate, stuff like that. How did you come up for yourself, like to what to take into account or what to charge, and how did you do that?
I think you don't need to really think about upfront except the hourly rate. So there's people around. You can speak about what's the average on the market, and I'm trying to go always above. So, but in general, there's you talk with all the freelancers. It's usually I'm not. If you're interested about numbers, I can speak about them. But it's not really hidden figures. They're public. There are ways to increase this. Different ways of doing this one, and yeah, you think there's calculators where you put your hourly rate, you put how many days you work, how many vacation you have. So there's things kind of quite straightforward. And I think yeah. Hope I answered your question. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
How do you market yourself?
Market?
Yeah, you were saying about your personal brand and all that.
I'm here talking with you, so.
Yeah, but Matt, very good. But none of these people are hiring iOS developers.
True, so I'm not talking directly with someone who is hiring, but you can talk, yes, tomorrow on, of course it's like really vague, but
like, is it through Twitter? Because quite a lot of people.
There's activity on Twitter. So actually, I'm trying to personally, so to know upfront when I want to change, when I need a change. Then I'm trying to look into what kind of companies I want to work for. Then I'm trying to research, like, do I have any insiders inside? Do I have anything in my network there? And then I'm trying to reach these people saying, like, also, additionally, there are a couple of big communities like CocoaHeads. There's Android Good Dutch user group. There's big Android Slack community entire the world. So they are posting some job vacancies. And yeah, so in general, you keep an eye.
And do you have a website, or do you find? Because I am also freelance, and I, for many years, maintained a website where I put my portfolio on and everything. But
it's useless.
I don't think it's.
I mean, like, if you don't do the blogging directly, I think that's not really helpful to have. I think it's maybe obligatory, or it's nice to have a website. I think it's actually obligatory. You have to be present online because you have a company. But in general, it's not probably for many people is actually source of employment. So.
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And one thing, if anyone is considering going freelance and they are here as highly skilled migrants, then you can keep that. If you get the 30% ruling, you can keep that when you go freelance, only if you open a BV. Because what I did was I became a ZZP, lost the 30% ruling, and only it's the importance of an accountant. Having a good accountant. Yeah, that's like 9 years of not having 30% ruling. So.
There is
open a BV.
Yep. There is actually one. There was also one question like, can I start being freelance if I don't have a resident permit? No, I mean like you don't have what's the permanent resident permit? Yeah, so I don't remember how it's called. And you can do it. So it's not directly. There are umbrella companies which will hire you like internal, but they will have a contract with you, really connected with your external contract. So basically, you work as external. They keep some really small margin, like a couple of euros per hour. You have keeping your 30% ruling, all kind of things legal, but you work already kind of as freelancer. So. Okay.
Well, thanks, Eugene.
Thank you so much.